Hello and thanks for stopping by. This video is being completed as a requirement of EDU 587, Communicating with Immigrants, a course I'm taking through Georgetown College. In this video, I'm going to present to you information I've researched on the country of Mexico, which will then be compared to information obtained through an interview with a family who immigrated from Mexico and is now living in the United States. The children in this family are English language learners, or ELLs, who are presently attending private school in Versailles, Kentucky. Based on this information, lessons learned will be presented as well as recommendations for teachers and other stakeholders regarding how to best handle the English language learners in their classrooms. Let's first discuss the language of Mexico. Spanish is the official language of Mexico. It's a Romance language spoken by 358 million speakers worldwide. The majority of the speakers are found in Mexico. Like English, Spanish employs the Roman alphabet. 30 to 40% of English words have Spanish equivalents. Also like English, Spanish has the word order of subject, verb, objects, SVO. There are a few exceptions to this, however, in that Spanish commonly places an adjective following a noun, whereas English does the opposite. Additionally, Spanish has 5 vowel sounds, whereas English has 14. Culture in Mexican households typically reflects the features from both the Indian past as well as influence from the Spanish colonial period. Households in Mexico average 5 or 6 people, with multiple generations commonly living together in the same house. Girls in Mexico don't have the individual freedoms that are afforded to females in the United States. 1 of every 4 Mexicans lives either on a farm or within a small village. Unfortunately, the villages are very impoverished and lack access to basic social services such as health care and education. The Mexican population is also ethnically diverse. There are distinct socioeconomic divides within the populations. Politics. Mexico is a federal republic and includes 31 states as well as the federal district of Mexico City. The present government was built from the Constitution that was created in 1917. Mexico has a president, Enrique Peña Nieto, who is serving a 6-year term in office. Mexico's legislative body is made up of the Congress, the Chamber of Deputies, and the judiciary court system. Like the United States, each state within Mexico has its own elected governor and legislature. Mexico has a very long history, so here I'm just going to provide you some of the highlights. It is believed that it all started with the classical period, starting in 300 and lasting till 900 AD, when the ancient Mayans, Zapotecans, and Teotihuacans ruled the land. From 1519 to 1521, Spanish forces led by Hernando Cortés conquered Mexico. Then, from 1810 to 1821, Mexico fought for independence from Spain and prevailed. In 1836, Texas declares independence from Mexico, and this resulted from the Battle of the Alamo. In 1848, the U.S. won a war and gained Mexico territory, which includes what is now Nevada, Utah, parts of Arizona, New Mexico, Wyoming, and Colorado. In 1862, there was the Battle of Puebla. This is the holiday that Cinco de Mayo honors. It is for the National Army defeat of French invaders. 1910, Mexican Revolution begins with citizens rising up against oppressive rulers. Then the new constitution was adopted in 1917, and that is the same constitution on which the government is now based. 1929, the National Revolutionary Party was established, which later evolved to the Institutional Revolutionary Party, which remained in power for the greater part of the 20th century. And, of course, in 2012, Mr. Enrique Peña Nieto was elected president. The geography of Mexico. As you may or may not know, it is located at the southern tip of North America. To the north, there is the U.S., the Gulf of California is to the northwest, the Pacific Ocean is to the west, Guatemala and Belize are in the south, and the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean are to the east. Mexico actually has no official religion. 9/10 of the population is Roman Catholic. Protestantism is also gaining popularity with the urban poor. Other indigenous people practice syncretic religions that share many of the same features of Roman Catholicism. Rites of passage. It's common for infants in Mexico to be baptized, even if the community in which the child is born does not observe other such significant Roman Catholic rites. Mexican female adolescents are honored on their 15th birthday with a ceremony called the quinceañera. Traditionally, the girl's father will ceremoniously exchange her childish shoes for a pair of high heels to symbolize her transition to womanhood, as you can see in the lovely picture on this slide. Education in Mexico. School is compulsory for children ages 6 to 18. As of 2004, preschool is also required. Public schools are funded by the federal government, with nearly 3/4 of all primary schools being situated in rural areas. About 1/7 of all school-aged children do not attend school, with nearly 1/3 of adults not having completed primary school. Approximately half of those in Mexico have completed high school, which is relatively high considering secondary schools are scarce in rural areas. Now let's discuss the information I obtained while interviewing a wonderful family who lives in Versailles, Kentucky. I shall commonly refer to the family as Rosalinda's family. I am referring to the mother when I say Rosalinda, although this is not her real name. For sake of anonymity, I have changed their names and obstructed their faces, not because they asked me to, but because I feel better in doing so to protect their privacy. Language interview. Rosalinda was adamant that her children speak Spanish only in the home. Her reasoning was that she wants her children to hear English only from native speakers, and she's fearful that her children will pick up bad English-speaking habits from her. Her husband speaks very little English. While interviewing her, Rosalinda spoke to the children mainly in Spanish, but had to use some English words when she was, I can only assume, unable to find a Spanish equivalent. This is a strategy that bilinguals, such as Rosalinda, unconsciously employed, and it's called borrowing. The children started speaking English at very young ages in preschool and in primary school. None of Rosalinda's children are receiving ESL services, although they are indeed English language learners. Not being in an ESL program does not seem to affect their performance in school, however. They attend a private Christian school in Versailles. Rosalinda indicated that she and her husband both come from meager means of life in Mexico. She comes from Guanajuato, a city in central Mexico that is part of the Sierra Madre Oriental mountain range. She said her parents both work full-time and spend most of their free time at church. She has 3 brothers and 3 sisters, but used to have 16. Apparently many of them died, as their family used to live deep in the mountains and were unable to reach the hospital when her brothers and sisters, who have since passed, were being born or were ill. When asked whether she experiences more freedoms here in the United States than she may have in Mexico, she kind of just shrugged her shoulders and expressed that the United States is more regimented than Mexico, but felt this was a good thing. It wasn't really a matter of having more freedoms there and fewer here. It was more a matter of feeling safer here than there. She indicated having no desire to ever move back to her home country. Along the same lines as our discussion of culture, when asked about politics, Rosalinda said she didn't know much about Mexico's politics, but felt that it really didn't matter because the majority of people do whatever they want whenever they want. She used driving as an example, stating that there aren't really rules to driving or laws that need to be obeyed. People are just kind of all over the place. Furthermore, she expressed never being interested in driving anyway, because having a car meant being at risk for being carjacked, which is apparently a common occurrence in her home city. Naturally, this is not something that I found while researching Mexico, but after she described it, I did a little deeper research and found that violent crimes such as this are in fact fairly common in her hometown. Within the first few minutes of speaking with Rosalinda, I could tell that she and her family were very religious. Interestingly enough, they are devoutly Christian, not Catholic. Although Rosalinda's parents are Catholic, and are extremely disappointed in Rosalinda for having left Catholicism for Christianity. So this has caused great tension in her relationship with her parents. Discussing education with Rosalinda did not render the same results that I found upon conducting research about education in Mexico. Rosalinda described the education system in Mexico as very strict, and that teachers expect high-quality work in every way, even quality paper and appearance. She also mentioned that school is only free through junior high and that high school must be paid for by the families attending. They also have to pay for their own supplies and books. According to Rosalinda, many Mexicans never obtain their high school diploma because their families simply can't afford to send them to high school. She said another common concern in regards to school is getting there, as there are no buses. She said the walk-drive to school can be pretty dangerous due to violence in the country. Although Rosalinda's children aren't receiving services for being English language learners, they are thriving in school nonetheless. Many other immigrant children around the country, however, do have a hard time making their way in school, and especially in the mainstream classroom with native English-speaking peers. In their book, Look at Me When I Talk to You, Helmer and Eddie state that the number of these ELL students in the classroom will only continue to rise as immigration in the United States increases. They go on to describe how many teachers aren't prepared to handle students with different languages, experiences, learning styles, and cultural backgrounds. This could ultimately end up harming the ELL students in the classroom who may feel frustrated and misunderstood. As a future teacher of ELLs, there are some very valuable lessons that I learned in completing this project. For starters, the fact that it was so difficult for me to find a family was an obvious indicator of cultural differences in welcoming strangers into the home. If cultures can vary in this aspect, they can certainly vary in others. The next lesson I learned will certainly have an effect on my professional life and how I interact and relate to my ELL students. In order to get to know my students, it seems it is essential to visit their homes. This is beneficial in many ways. It allows us to develop awareness and appreciation of the cultural backgrounds of our students, which ends up increasing the chances of them succeeding. Diaz, Rico, and Weed indicate that getting to know our ELL students' backgrounds will make them feel a valued and respected part of class, which can be motivating. Secondly, we can better teach ELLs if we know how much they already know about certain topics. Herrera and Murray assert that students' learning styles are commonly a product of their home culture, so gathering information on this can help inform instruction. By getting more information on our students' prior learning, teachers and administrators can determine if a student is struggling with a concept or is just battling with a language barrier. Teachers can also work to make links between what students already know and what new concepts are being presented. Of course, getting to know a student's linguistic background is also a must in this case. So by learning how proficient a student is in his or her native language, teachers can get a better idea of how well a student will do with English. A great first step in getting to know students is by researching their home country. Doing so will render copious information regarding their cultural and linguistic background, similar to what I did with Rosalinda's family. But, as my experience with this project shows, we can't always rely on the information we obtain in research. Understanding a student's home life and taking the time to visit them in their homes is no doubt an invaluable experience. Another effort that teachers and administrators can take is to create a culturally responsive schooling atmosphere for their ELL students. Teachers in schools who comprehend and practice culturally responsive schooling create an atmosphere wherein effective teaching and learning occur in a culturally supported, learner-centered context. Culturally responsive schooling is comprised of 4 major components that facilitate student achievement: respecting student diversity, working with attitudes and abilities that can either facilitate or limit support for cultural diversity, sustaining high expectations for all students, marshaling parental and community support for schooling, differentiating instruction, building an awareness of and celebrating diversity, and educating students about diversity are all methods of respecting students' diversity. Another measure of culturally responsive schooling is to adapt to students' attitudes about culture. This can include addressing the use of language in class, classroom organization, teacher-student interactions, and curriculum. Teachers who are culturally responsive also place high expectations on their students by assessing their ability and achievement and through challenging them. A final measure of fostering a culturally responsive classroom is by facilitating family and community support for schooling. With this support, teachers can develop a real respect for the gifts that students bring to their classroom. Hopefully with this video you have a better idea of how to serve the ELL students in your classroom, as well as how to communicate with the parents and families of these students.